The Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture is going to open its doors to the public next weekend. It's a museum that has been 100 years in the making. Among its nearly 37,000 artifacts is a piece of history from Detroiter Edith Lee Payne. Edith was the 12-year-old girl who was captured in one of the most famous images from the 1963 Civil Rights March on Washington. She stood in the crowd carrying a banner calling for jobs and freedom. This weekend, Edith donated that banner to the new Smithsonian Museum. I spoke with Edith 3 years ago on American Black Journal. She talked then about how she did not learn of the historic photo until 45 years after the march.
I actually discovered that the photo had been taken and was in existence when my cousin was browsing a catalog that contained Black history calendars. And the photos of the calendar, the cover, front and back, showed my picture on the back holding that banner. And she phoned me. She lives in Baltimore. She phoned me, and of course I didn't believe her, because why would I be on a calendar with Martin Luther King and Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth? So I pulled it up on the website, and sure enough, there was this face that it was still difficult for me to believe. It's me.
It was you.
So I called another friend and asked her to pull up the website and look at it and say, is that me? And so that kind of went on for a while. And
so that had to startle you, though. This just the idea of, you know, pulling up a web page and there's your photo. That's not just a picture on a website, but it's a part of civil rights history.
Right. Well, I didn't know the depth of where that picture was.
Yeah.
She only mentioned to me at the time that it was in a museum. So I started my search first with the Smithsonian and then to the Library of Congress. And it was the Library of Congress that directed me to the National
Archives, right.
And said where it was. As far as I knew, that was the only place that that photo had been shown until a few months later. I saw it on a documentary done by Antoine Fuqua.
Okay. And do you remember the photo being taken? You had no idea.
No idea.
Yeah. So tell me though about the march. I mean, so you were at the March on Washington in '63, but you were also part of the march in Detroit in 1963.
I was. My mother knew, of course, like the thousands of others that went, that Dr. King was going to be there. We went, and that's when he asked the participants there to join him at the march in Washington.
In Washington, I see.
Because Washington, D.C. is my mother's home.
Okay.
So it's where we went for vacation every year. She decided to schedule our vacation to go then, which also happened to be my birthday.
Okay.
Yeah. August 28th.
August 28th,
yes,
right. Okay.
Yes.
And did you go with a group of people, or was it just...
It was just my mother and I, and we actually left that weekend, and we took a Greyhound bus, the usual bus ride, because she didn't drive. And so we actually left from my aunt's house in Northeast D.C.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. And talk to me about being a 12-year-old young lady at this march. I mean, you had to have some sense of the place it would have in history just by the sheer number of people in Washington.
Well, when we attended the march in Detroit a few months earlier, it didn't strike me as being anything historic just because there were a lot of people there.
Right.
I was used to being around a lot of people. I used to go to the Olympia. You know, my mother took me to a lot of things. Never a crowd quite like that, but because Dr. King was more of a Reverend King to me, it was just like being at a huge church service. Okay, and that's kind of how I look at him and respect him then and as well as now. The same for being in Washington, but in that time and hearing what he talked about, the problems in the South, it bothered me because there were children like myself that couldn't do the things that I could do.
So even as a 12-year-old, you were really aware of that.
Oh yeah, I was in junior high school at that time.
Right.
So to know that there were children that couldn't attend school, I went to integrated schools. I lived in an integrated neighborhood in Detroit. We took the bus and sat wherever we wanted to sit.
Right.
And we just lived the dream that Dr. King spoke about. So it was really disturbing to me to know that in this very same country, just a few hundred miles away, people were not able to live under this United States Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and all those things that we learned about in school.
Right, Right.
So yeah, that bothered me, and I understood his passion.
Yeah. So now you heard the speech twice.
Yes.
Then I mean, you heard it first here in Detroit and second in Washington. Do you remember what your initial reaction was? I mean, it is easily the most famous speech he's ever given, and it's one of the most famous speeches that anyone has ever given. Do you remember feeling like when he gave it that first time? What did it feel like? How did it move you?
The first time, it was exciting to hear because I knew who he was, and I knew what he stood for. The second time, it meant a little more, not just the speech, but the whole environment, because there were so many entertainers there. People that I could equate with that I would see on TV. Mahalia Jackson, for one.
Right, sure.
And seeing her on the movie Imitation of Life, it was just striking for me to see her standing there singing. Lena Horne was there. She came over and spoke with my mother because they used to entertain together. But Dr. King's voice, it's just something about his voice that just, I don't know, it pierces you. And the way he speaks, it's so much compassion. But his message is also spiritual, and that was something that I could relate to.
Yeah. And so you still have the banner that you were carrying that day in Washington. Here, we'll hold that up for the viewers. That's something. I mean, this is a 50-year-old banner.
Yes, it is.
So tell me how you've managed to hang on to it and keep it in such good condition for all that time.
Well, actually, as most children have to do and say how I spent my summer vacation when you go back to school, I did a report on a poster board and mounted this banner and typed a report on my typewriter that we had back then. Remington Rand, as a matter of fact.
You remember the typewriter brand?
I remember the typewriter, yes. I was so happy to get it. And pictures that I had cut out of the Look or Life magazine. And so it was mounted. And my mother was a keeper. She just kept things. And she passed away 20 years ago. But she still had it, and of course I kept it.
Wow, wow. And so now you've got it mounted, and
yes,
you can pass it on to other generations,
yes,
right? Yeah.
To my grandchildren.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So tell me a little bit about how the march affected you, the things that you've done. I mean, you've been a civil rights activist your whole life, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I have. It affected me. It inspired me. Dr. King inspired me. My mother inspired me because of the situations that she encountered in her travels through the South as an entertainer. I knew and always felt, but it was something within me, so it inspired what was in me, that there was a need to do something. Whatever something was wrong, that's just how I was. It had to be right. We had to make it right.
Right.
When I lived in Maryland, I got married. The schools were desegregated, but they wanted them to be segregated again, and I had to fight to keep my children in the schools and
in the integrated
white
schools.
Yes, because the education was better. Everything was better for them.
Yeah.
So even before that, it just inspired me, and of course I continue to do that now in a number of ways.
Right, right. Including you were one of the original challengers to the emergency manager law.
Yes.
And you're a frequent speaker at city council meetings.
Frequent.
Boy,
yes.
that alone should earn you a medal, right? Going down there and putting up with that, right?
Yeah, but our voices have to be heard, and as Dr. King did, he was a voice for the voiceless.
Right.
And that's what we have to do.
Yeah.
That's how we keep his dream and his legacy alive.
That's our program for today. Thanks for watching, and thanks to the Detroit Historical Museum for hosting us. You can get more information about our guests at AmericanBlackJournal.org, and you can always connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. We'll see you next time.